Hi, everyone. It's A Ticket to Christ. Thank you for tuning back in. We're still looking at being patient, right? Growing in patience. It is so important. And the Bible stresses being patient in affliction because that's a lot of times where your patience is tested when you're going through challenges, when you're going through difficulty. And a lot of times, even though you know the promises of God, it doesn't mean that those promises happen right away. They take time sometimes. God gives you a promise, but it doesn't always come to pass. And so, to sometimes to build our character, to build the soil of our heart, so that we can carry the promise once it's fulfilled, we go through challenges, because difficulties and challenges build our faith. They build our knowledge of God, that we know God firsthand. We know His power through experience. We're able to have good witness and testimony and good and right faith, accurate faith in Him. We don't have to talk about what God did to this person in the Bible or that person over there. We can say what God did for us, for ourselves, right? And that comes through experience. And I think a good example of somebody who was patient in affliction is David. We're looking at 1 Samuel 23 from verse 13. God rejected Saul as king. We looked at Saul yesterday and we saw a little glimmer as to why, but there were other factors there too. But anointed David as the next king. But it would have to run its course. And so David, in the meantime, through Saul's jealousy, once he realized it, had to run for his life. For years, he had to run for his life and live. He was driven from, in essence, the kingdom, and he had to run, and at one point to the wilderness. And here's where we're looking in verse 13. Then David and his men, which were about 600, arose and departed out of Keilah, and went whithersoever they could go. And it was told Saul that David was escaped from Keilah, and he forbore to go forth. And David abode in the wilderness in strongholds, and remained in a mountain in the wilderness of Ziph. And Saul sought him every day, but God delivered him not into his hand. And David saw that Saul was come out to seek his life, and David was in the wilderness of Ziph in a wood. And Jonathan, Saul's son, arose and went to David into the wood, and strengthened his hand in God. And he said unto him, Fear not, for the hand of Saul my father shall not find thee, and thou shalt be king over Israel, and I shall be next unto thee, and that also Saul my father knoweth. And they two made a covenant before the Lord. And David abode in the wood, and Jonathan went to his house. Then came up the Ziphites to Saul to Gibeah, saying, Doth not David hide himself with us in strongholds in the wood in the hill of Hachilah, which is on the south of Jeshimon? Now therefore, O king, come down according to all the desire of thy soul to come down, and our part shall be to deliver him into the king's hand. Okay. So let's pause here. When you read on, you can read on. I just want to keep this short. You'll see that God delivered David from Saul's hand, even though this plotting took place. But what is jumping out at you? What are you seeing? What are you hearing? And so if you haven't already, you should read through this whole account of David, read the whole book of 1 Samuel. You will see that Jonathan and David were very good friends. They loved one another like brothers. And Jonathan knew, of David being the one who would succeed Saul as king, and it did not bother him. He didn't have a jealousy toward David. His attitude was actually the right attitude. And if Saul had taken that attitude, things could have gone differently for him. But instead, Saul was just bent in jealousy and rage. And even though he didn't have what it took to effectively lead Israel, he was always cowering in fear and giving in to the people and not knowing what to do, wringing his hands and going astray. Someone more worthy stood up, and he didn't have the character or the heart to see that and to see that David was the better option for Israel. And so he kept pursuing David to try to kill him. What's jumping out at me first is in verse 13, where the 600 men that were riding with David, they were all people from all walks of life who were running, hiding from the law, right? And they banded around David. And it says they went whithersoever they could go. So they had to kind of live by their wits' end. They didn't have any kind of concrete place. It was like, okay, here's a safe place tonight. Tomorrow we're might have to leave there and go someplace else. And the challenge of this is that they were traveling this way with their wives and children. So these were some bold men. They had a lot of courage. And David, right, of course, being the leader, had that courage, but his courage and strength came from God, from his faith in God and his trust in God. And that underlying relationship with God is what gave him the patience to endure all this challenge. And we see God also sends us help, right? Verse 16 also stands out to me. Jonathan, his friend, who is of the house of Saul, came and strengthened his hand in God. And this is how he strengthens him. He says, don't be afraid, right? For the hand of Saul, my father, won't find thee. You are to be king over Israel. I am next in line to thee. So even from Saul's own household, God puts it on Jonathan's heart to remind David of that promise. And they made that covenant before the Lord. And I just see Jonathan's heart, just an incredible heart for God. Believing this is what God said, this is going to happen, and I'm glad for David, and I'm helping him righteously find faith in the Lord. And God will send people while you're in that time, the wilderness time, when you're waiting for the promises of God, and life seems challenging. Sometimes you feel like you're standing in the flames of fire. The challenges can feel overwhelming emotionally. God will send people to help you find faith and strengthen him, to give you discernment and understanding according to his word, to help you understand the season and time of your life even. But ultimately, of course, you are the one who has to walk it out. And David did that. When you read throughout, you see David honored God in everything that he did. He waited for the Lord's timing, and God was the one who delivered him out of the hand of Saul. So David didn't have to lift his hand against Saul. David didn't have to do anything unrighteously to get the promise. He didn't have to take anything in his own hands, and he didn't do that. He was brought into the kingship and in his role and his position in due time, at the right time when God saw it fit. And so that's what patience is to do. It's to enable us to grow and develop and be trained and to be strengthened so that we can have the skills that we need, so that when God brings us into whatever position he has for us, we're well equipped, right? And so he is a good example to study through if you're going through a really hard time, if you feel like you're in the wilderness, or if you feel like, life is just really, really tough. These are the promises of God, but I'm not seeing them happen, so that you can develop the fruit of the Spirit of patience in your life and really develop true fruit, right? That you're not just eking it out. It is the Spirit of God formed in you. Jesus, character of Christ formed in you, and the character of Christ is a characteristic of patience. Beloved, this is it from me with this example. I hope it's blessing you or helping you in some small way. Have a great day.